All right, so far we've covered a lot of topics. Just three more topics to go, and this is very small. This is like very small. Only these two topics are a bit hard. But let's talk about how we can see a conversation for a chat room by its ID. So far we created a chat room. We are able to post messages in that chat room, but I want to see all of the conversations that are happening in that chat room. So imagine there are like two users, John and Jane, and they just want to see all of the conversation that is happening. So we'll talk about how this API is done. So again, I'm in my server's index.js file, and I have this root slash room, which has the middleware decode, which ensures that all of my APIs, all of the data that I'm processing is authenticated. No unauthenticated user is using this. It's using this chat room router, which is defined here, and to see a conversation for a room ID, I'm using this API, which is chatroom.getConversation by room ID, and it's defined in my controllers called chatroom.js. Is this particular method? So let's see what this does. Let's break this down step by step. I have a room ID here. So I'm going to get that using request.params.room ID, and then what I'm going to see is I'm going to see if that particular room exists or not. So don't save. Uh, save, save, save. So get recent conversation by a room ID. All right. So I want to see that the room ID that I'm passing in right now, does this exist or not? It doesn't. I want to implement a functionality like this, right? So in my chat room models, I'll just go here and I'll create this method called get chat room by room ID. Pretty straightforward. Get chat room by room ID. I just pass in a room ID, and then using this dot find one method, I just see against this ID schema, and I check against this room ID, and whatever I find, I just return it. And if the value is none, I just return a response 400 saying this room doesn't exist. And if the room exists, I just proceed forward, and this doesn't go in this if block. Also, now that we're at it, uh, there's I was just wondering, maybe you guys would have like thought about this, that why does this not work? So since this is a static method, static methods uh, are available all are available on all instances of classes using this arrow function. If I use this, uh, this will point to this instance of this file. I don't want to do that. I want it to point to the class instance. So that's why the arrow function doesn't work. We have to maintain the this reference which points to this chat room schema. Anyways, moving forward. So we've got our room. Next, what I want to do is what I'll do is I'll just put return here so that no code is executed below this. And what I will do here, I will just control this, console.log room, and see what happens. I'll provide it a valid room ID and see. Uh, so it's giving me user ID type, and chat initiator. So what I'll do is I want to get all the informations for these two users that are in this chat room, and I just want to see who those users are. So in my user model, I'll go here and I'll create a method called get users by ID. I'll pass in IDs, which is an array of IDs, and I'll use this dot find method. I look for the sorry. So I look for this ID, but what I will do is I will use this dollar in operator. So what this does is it's basically an includes property. So what this will do is it accepts an array of values, and I'll pass in this array of values, and for each item in that array it will map to this column ID, and whatever values that it matches, individual values that it matches with this ID, it will return me those things in an array. So let's see if that this works or not. um, all right, so I'm getting values for these users as well. Cool. So far so good. Now, imagine you're having conversation with two people. The conversation can exceed. I mean, you type in a lot of messages. I need to make sure that the data that I'm loading from my API is paginated. I don't want to get like 100 or like 10,000 records of data altogether. That's just going to crash my server, because my database and my server will have to process a lot of information, and the user might not need those thousands of record. The user just might need the last 20 messages or something like that. So I'm going to implement pagination here. In my query parameters here, I'll just come in here, params. I'll add in limit 10, and I'll say page is equal to 0. So I want paginated data. Sorry. So I want paginated data, and for each page that I get, I want to limit it to 10 records or maybe 2 records. By default, if I don't provide these values, limit and page, in my query parameters, I'm just going to set this to 0 and 10. And the reason I'm converting this to an integer, because all the values that I get from uh, the query string here in my API route, they're all strings. So I initially first convert them into numbers, and then I set this as an option. The next thing that I do is I have this chat message model, and I have this API called, I have this static method called get conversation by room ID, where I pass in the valid room ID that exists and options. And then based on that, what I do is I just return the conversation as is along with users. So let's just get to it. See how this chat message model works. I have the room ID, and I have the options, which is the page and the limit. So the method that I want to see here is get conversation by room ID. It takes in a room ID and options. Again, this is an aggregation method, and I think we've covered all of the possible types of aggregations that there were while we were creating a message in a chat room. There's just a few new operators that we learned in this video. So I take my room ID, and I have my options. Options have this limit and page within, and if none is provided, I just set it to an empty object. All right, so I want to get all of the messages in my chat message model, like all of them. I have like all of the message here, all of the messages here from all of the rooms. I just want to get all of the messages that belong to one chat room, right? I'll get that, and you always see the latest message at the bottom, and then the previous message and something like that, right? So what I'll do is I'll sort my messages. I don't want the oldest message at the top. I want the newest message at the top, right? So I'll use a sort operator, and I'll reverse my messages order based on the created at item in my database, which comes from this timestamps true. Once that is done, I'll perform a lookup. Lookup, as I've mentioned before, is our joins, similar to what we have in our MySQL databases. So I'll perform a join on the users collection, and from my local database field, I'll take this posted by user item, and I will compare this with the ID in the users collection, and then return this as a posted by user. And if you guys remember earlier, lookup returns an array of items, and since we know that posted by user is just going to be one, because the user ID is unique, I'm just going to unwind it so that it becomes into an object, one object, and whatever that data is, I'm just going to return it. And the pagination part is so simple. All we have to do is, so we have this page and we have this limit. So I'm going to tell, for example, my page is 0 and my limit is 10, right? So I'm just going to tell him, skip the first 10 pages. But since the page is 0, it's not going to skip anything. It's just going to get me it's not going to, it's going to start from the 0 index, whatever that is. And how many records do I want to get? Whatever, my limit is 10, so just get me the first 10 records. Now imagine if I get the last 10 records, which are sorted in reverse order. But when I show this in my chat message, the last message that I sent was, for example, hi, how are you, hello, right? And when I started sorting it, I reverse it. So how are you, hi, hello, how are you? So when I sorted this, how are you, hello, hi, right? Now when I have, for example, these two messages which are sorted in reverse order, which is how are you, hello, and hi. I just want to get the last two, right? So I get the last two, how are you and hello, but the last message is how are you, right? So I want to like reverse that order again, in the set of pagination I have, so that how are you will come here and hi will come here. If that makes any sense, I hope I didn't confuse anyone. And if the page is, for example, if I'm on the second page, and the limit is, because we're going with limit 2, so I'm telling my aggregate operator to skip to multiply page 2 with limit 2, because each page is showing 2 records. So if I'm on the second page and the limit is 2, it's 4. So skip the first 4 records, whatever they are, and give me the next of all the records that are available. And as soon as it comes here, it says, okay, I've skipped the first 4, whatever they were. Now I'm just going to get the first 2 records that I get, because the limit is 2 here. And whatever that record is, I'm just going to like switch them again in the order, because this is the order that I want to see in my chat room, and that is how I'll see it. So let's just see if this works. I'm not going to save this file. uh, Whatever I've done here, I don't want to save this. I'll just discard it, and just for the sake of it, I'm going to limit this to 2, right? So I have this chat room. I'll create a couple of messages. So I'll just come here, I'll post a message. I'll say again hi, which I talked about. I'll say hello. I'll just put in 2 because this is very confusing. And then I'll say how are you, right? Now if I come here and I pass in that room ID, I have a limit, you know what, I'll have a limit of 200, 2000. So I just want to get all the records, right? Whatever they are, or there are a lot of records. I'm just going to tell it, give me the first page, whatever it is, and give me the first 3 records. So remember how our order was. It was hi, hello, and how are you. I'm going to limit it to 1 and set the page to 0. So the last message was how are you, which is going to show at the very bottom of our chat, because the oldest message in our chat will show at the top, and this just has like 1 record, right? I'll go on page 2. Let's see what that says. It says hello, and then the third page will be, because sorry, the limit doesn't change, the page changes. So the second page is hello, and the third page is hi, because the limit is 1. Hi. So the limit is 1. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I hope this was helpful. And since we're at it, let's just discuss the other API as well, because they're very similar. So again, I'm in my rooms collection, which has the decode middleware. And let me just check out this file, because I don't want this to be changed. I'll come in my chat room, and I have this like get slash method. So what I want to do is, for my user, I want to see all of the last messages of from all of the people's people that I've chatted. So for example, if I was at my in my WhatsApp, I I I I have like these sets of people that I'm talking to, and all I can see here is the last set of messages for each group or each individual that I've talked to. I want to do that. I want to have a chat homepage which shows me all the last messages for all the chats that I've had. So in my chat room, I'm going to create a controller for that, right? In my chat room, I'm going to have a message called get recent conversation, and get recent conversations is very simple. All I'm going to do is I'm going to get chat room by, sorry, not this one. It's this one, right? So if, since this router is coming through the decode middleware, I have my current user logged in, so I get this information from my auth header token, and I've implemented the similar pagination style. The pagination is going to be stay the same, and I want to get all the rooms associated to my ID. So if I were to come here, every single chat room that I have, if it has this 92 ID, no matter how many chat rooms there are, I want to get all of them, right? And then for because this will return me an array of objects, I just need an array of strings for I just need the room IDs. So I'll just put in a map on the room IDs and get the room IDs. Next, what I want to do is for all the room IDs that I've gotten, I'll pass in the room IDs, the options, which is the pagination, and my own information of as the user who's logged in. So in my let's just see this method first. What this does is, because I want to get all of the rooms that belong to a certain user ID. And it's pretty straightforward. Get chat rooms by user ID. I pass in a user ID, and all I'm doing is I'm using await this dot find user IDs, and I'm using the all operator. So I'm just telling him that I'm just telling Mongoose that give me all the chat rooms where in the user IDs array this ID exists. If this ID exists, just give me this entire document item, like this entire document item, and if it exists, if my ID exists in this one as well, return me this item as well. Next, I have this get recent conversation, and which has this room IDs, options, and current logged in user. So let's just go and see for that what it is about. Let me just collapse all. Didn't do anything. All right. Sorry. All right. So this is the method that I was talking about. In my chat messages, I have my chat room IDs, I have my options, and I have my current user logged in. So all that I'm going to do is I'm going to get all of in my chat room messages. This one, right? I'm going to get all of these records which has those array of rooms that I'm passing into this method. Remember we took in all the rooms IDs from this query, and then I'm passing in this array of strings to this method. So I'm going to get all of the records which have the room ID from that array, and if all of those like match, I'm going to get them in an array. And then what I'm going to do is all the individual chat room that I have, I'm going to group them by their ID. So imagine this chat room ID had like two IDs that I was passing, 1 and 2, and for one I had like 10 messages, and for two chat room ID I had 20 messages. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take the 10 messages and those 20 messages, and I'm going to group them by their chat room ID, because chat room ID is unique and is common in these sets. So these 10 messages have one chat room ID, and these 20 messages have another chat room ID. So I'm going to group them by their ID. I'm going to get their last message ID. So from this 10 subset, whatever the last message was, whatever the most recent message that was created, I'm going to get that. Same goes for chat room ID. A message, I'm going to get the last message, the last type from that last object. same for posted by user, created by user, and read by recipients user. I'm going to get all of those records. So from these 10 and from these 20 records, I'm going to get the latest one. This will be one, and from these 20, I'm going to get this last message, whatever this last message was in this set of 20 messages. I have two messages, and I'm going to sort them uh, in terms of latest, whatever the message was latest, using this created at flag. -1 shows that it should be in uh, latest order, right? Whatever the latest is. And since my chat messages have this posted by user ID, what I'm going to do is I'm going to perform a lookup similar to what we've done before a lot of times. And then I'm going to also get information on my chat rooms. Uh, Although I don't need to do that because I already have rooms, I can just like get conversation from here and then use a if else and map it there. But I'm just doing this for learning purposes so that you have more hands-on experience using aggregations in Mongoose. All I'm doing here is I'm getting the chat room information. I'm unwinding it so that it's an object, and I'm going to unwind all the user IDs from that chat room. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to perform a lookup again on those user IDs and get this as a user profile. The same I'm going to do for the read by recipients, which for this instance it has one but can have like two as well. And I'm going to perform a lookup on those read by recipients IDs. And at the end, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to group them by their room info ID, which is their chat room. Because remember when we had 10, it became one, and from 20 it became one. So before we started doing all of these lookups and expanding our records, uh, the unique thing was our room ID. So I'm again going to group them by their room ID. The first time I did was by their chat room ID. This time I'm going to do it again by their chat room ID, because I know I have just different types of messages, and I'm going to get the last message ID, chat room ID, message type, posted by user. The only thing that I'm going to, and created add. The only thing I'm going to do is add to set is for all the users that I get, which I invited using read by recipients and user profile and room info. I'm going to add them to set, and then I'm going to perform my standard pagination that I've done before. Let's see how this works. Um, so I want to see my get recent conversation, which is this API localhost colon 3000 slash room. I'm going to perform it, and let's see how many chat rooms. So I'm getting information from two chat rooms, and just to tell you if these two chat rooms are unique, just let me minimize these things. So I have one chat room that starts with C62FAD153A4, and the other is this one. Now one thing that I'm noticing here is that I've messed up is the message ID is not unique, right? It's actually mapped to the what do you call it? It's actually mapped to the chat room ID. So just for the sake of it, I'm going to comment this out. I'm going to see what my message ID is. Unexpected token in chat message. Why? Chat message line 180. Did I do anything there? Oh, I think I did something there. Ah, I added this array. Sorry. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to uncomment this because I just saw an error, and I'll probably just push this to my record as well. I want to see the message ID. This is the message ID, right? This is my unique message ID, which I was messing up. So I'll just do this as my message ID. Now everything should work. Yes. Brilliant. So just to see that I'm getting two different messages from like the latest messages from two different chat rooms where I belong to. It's one is from this one, and the other is from this one, and the people involved in this chat room is Adil and Pikachu, because I think this is a support type chat. and the other is from Adil and John Doe. So this is a consumer to consumer chat because we only have three users, Adil and John, which are consumers, and Pikachu, which is from support. Pikachu is very supportive. And then we have our message object, which is the last message. Remember, this is just an example that we did very recently. It was posted by me, and then it has read by recipients. And yeah, that is pretty much it. These were like the most complicated queries that you can possibly do in Mongoose. And with this, I think we're already done with 98% of our course. I hope this was helpful. If you think anything can be improved for all of this content, just reach out to me on Twitter, write me a message, and I will make sure that I improve this and improve my content in the future as well for you guys. Have fun.